What's up everybody, welcome to Woodness Goodness. First of all, for all the subscribers I've got, I know I don't have 1 million people, we can do it one day. Guys, I just want to thank everyone, my almost 6,000 subscribers. Thanks for hanging out, thanks for liking what I'm doing. If you like this project and this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Beside me is a project that has been on and off for about a month, obviously because I haven't posted in about a month. But this is a coffee table I made out of old car magazines. I've got stacks of old car magazines. It turned out really awesome. It is so soft. It looks really cool. And of course, because this is YouTube, I threw some LED lights under it to give it that underglow, to really show off the fact that it does look like it's floating. Anyhow, enough jibber jabber. Let's get into the build and let's get after it. Yeah, whoa, 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 it's so soft. I'm dizzy, I'm dizzy. All right, so to start this project off, I went through my old car magazine collection. All these magazines are from the 80s, so all the advertisements and marketing material in these magazines is pretty fun to look at. So I started by taking the staples out of the spines of the magazines and then picked the pages I liked, and I started using scissors to cut the pages out that I liked. And then I did the old school way, licking the seam of the magazine page and then slowly breaking it apart, which works very well. Then I went to my workshop. With a 4x8 sheet of plywood, I cut it in half, so then I would have a 4 foot by 4 foot piece, and that would be the top of my coffee table. Next, with the other piece that was left over, I cut that into 4 strips at 12 inches by 4 feet. These would become the sides of the coffee table. I brought all that inside and I began to use Mod Podge to apply the magazine clippings to the sides of the coffee table. I'd never used Mod Podge before, and the moisture of the glue kind of sunk into the magazine and created some wrinkles, but I didn't let it bother me. And since all the magazine clippings look the same, I just went along with it. After I glued them down, I would put a coat of Mod Podge on top. And then I proceeded to do the larger piece, which was the top of the coffee table, applying Mod Podge to the whole thing, and then my pages of magazine. I love these old marketing advertisements from the 80s magazines. They're just hilarious. Back to the workshop. We're preparing for epoxy. Make sure the edges of your piece are off the ground so the epoxy can drip over the edges. I cut off some excess pieces of magazine that I just glued right over the edge so I could do exactly what I'm doing, cut it off later so I have those nice clean cuts. Mix up your epoxy resin. I use Pro-Marine Supplies. It's a 1-to-1 ratio epoxy resin and works very well for thin applications. When you mix epoxy resin, you want to mix it very well and making sure you're minimizing air bubbles, but you want that good mix so it adheres well and is just a good mix overall and actually does what it's supposed to do. You don't necessarily have to let it drip over the edge, but that will just kind of ensure that everything will be nice, crisp, and clean. You can cut it off later. And then I used a blowtorch to remove any air bubbles and just release any bubbles that were developing. I used a popsicle stick, or you can use pretty much anything just to level it out and get that epoxy resin to the edges. Now I'm cutting the width of my sides of the coffee table to length. I did a pre-cut just to remove the little blisters from the drip off of the epoxy resin. Then I set my blade to 45 degrees as the tops of the pieces would have to be 45 degrees to match the 45-degree cuts that I would put on the top of the coffee table. And then I did the final cut for the bottom of the piece right to the magazine. So it's about 11 inches and a quarter for these pages of the magazine. Now I'm prepping the top of my coffee table with painter's tape because I'm going to use a skill saw or a circular saw to cut my 45-degree angles on all four sides of the top of my coffee table. The painter's tape just stops it from getting scratched, and even though I'm going to be sanding later, I wanted to minimize any deep scratching that could possibly happen. I'm cutting my pieces to length, so 45-degree angles on either side, and the total length of the sides are 47 inches. And the top of my coffee table is also 47 inches by 47 inches. I cut some small plywood blocks and put them on two of the sides of the coffee table, and this just made the spacing and the gapping perfect, so it'd be easy for the glue up, so the pieces would have something to get stopped on and they wouldn't just kind of slide off the 45-degree angle. My glue up wasn't exactly perfect. I didn't really know what I was doing getting into it, but painter's tape worked well. Okay, it's not clamping like I want it to, so I'm going to have to do the unthinkable. Okay. So I put painter's tape around all the seams and that hugged everything together, and then I proceeded to put a lot of heavy stuff on the top of the coffee table, which pinched it and kept it snug as the glue cured, and it actually worked pretty well. I sanded the whole thing with 220 grit sandpaper so I could get a nice mechanical bond for the flood coat of epoxy resin. Make sure you get rid of all the dust that you created anytime you sand epoxy resin so you get that bond if you do a second coat. I used a drill press to mix my epoxy resin so I could walk away for 5 minutes and come back and it would be perfectly mixed. Halfway through the project, I realized to trowel or to spread epoxy resin, it was a lot easier with a notched trowel. So I got a plastic notched trowel. If you want something like this, I'll have a link in the description below. And then I proceeded to chop it with a paintbrush, which I've seen a lot of people do on YouTube, and it seems to work out and mixes the epoxy resin just a little bit more. Make sure you do all four sides of the coffee table and minimize the dripping. I didn't minimize the dripping, and because of that, I had a lot more sanding to do. Now I sanded the entire piece, especially the rough edges, with 60 grit, 80 grit, and went all the way up to 800 grit along the whole entire piece, which gives you a really nice smooth finish. You'll see the top of the coffee table has a lot of streaks, a lot of drips. The reason I wanted it to drip over originally is to make that nice bond between all sides of the coffee table as well as the top of the coffee table. Sanding for days. After I sanded and dusted it all off, I wanted to see what it would look like, so I wiped it all down with a rag and some water, and that gave me an idea of what it was going to look like. Now I'm gonna make the base of this coffee table. I used some scrap wood, scrap 2x4s, and cut them to 12 inches in length. Now
Now for the base, I'm gonna use a scrap 2x12 that was lying around my shop to make the 4 sides of the base. The base is gonna be 35 inches by 35 inches, so I cut myself 2 pieces at 32 inches and 2 pieces at 35 inches. You're gonna have some overlap, so the 1.5 inches of the 2x12 thickness will make up that 3 inches. So you have a 35 inch by 35 inch base. I made the mistake of building this on my not so level concrete floor, so the base wasn't perfectly level. I had to kind of mess with it later, but just keep that in mind. Then I flipped my coffee table upside down so I could see exactly where I wanted my base to be. Using some scrap plywood, I cut a bunch of 2.5 inch strips, and these strips would keep the base centered and secure on the coffee table itself without having to glue it or screw it, since I wanted to be able to take it apart and move it around in 2 pieces. I centered the base and then glued and nailed the strips to the coffee table using 1.25 inch nails. You don't want to use long nails or else it might pop through the top of your beautiful coffee table. I wanted to make sure that it would fit, so I did a dry fit in my workshop before I brought it in my house. And it fit. I went over the entire thing once more with 800 grit sandpaper because I wanted to be baby bottom smooth. And 800 grit is pretty good at that. I finished the entire thing off with a beeswax, and I'll have the link in the description below. It's a product I like to use called Daddy Bands, and it works really well. I brought it inside and then applied the 2 LED light strips that are battery operated on the underside of the coffee table. I put Velcro on it so I could easily remove the battery pack and replace the batteries as needed. Then all I had to do was put it back down, and there you have it. Beautiful, recycled, upcycled magazine epoxy resin coffee table. And it's floating. Well, it looks like it's floating. This was a lot of fun to make. Took a while, but I learned a lot along the way. If you guys want to do a project like this at all, feel free to ask me any questions or any tips and tricks that I learned along the way, and I'll be happy to share those. As always, guys, thanks so much for hanging out and watching my video. Hope you liked it. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe, and give me ideas of what you want to see next. I want to have a lot more fun with this channel and build things that you've never seen before. And yeah, I guess I'll see you on the next one. Thanks, guys. See you later.